New regime, new takeover in College Station. Obviously, Joe, everybody, probably the biggest story during the season, not on the field, was Jimbo Fisher being fired. We had talked about him being fired for so long. I'll give you your credit on that. You said in the beginning of the season, he's finished, he's cooked, he's done. They pay him the $75 million to get out of there. Well, I just never thought that they would actually go through with paying $75 million. But nevertheless, a new coaching staff, a new era, a new regime. What are your thoughts about this year in our deep dive going into Texas A&M?
First of all, I keep pounding the table for Nick Scourton. I really think that this kid is going to be the best defensive player in the SEC right next to James Pierce Jr. I think that he is going to take over and completely dominate some games. There is a rarity. You were giving me a hard time about Notre Dame not having that, who's the takeover game type of a guy. He is that and more. He is a bulldozing edge rusher with rare strength, rare burst, perfectly coupled with the mind of Mike Elko, who is a defensive line genius, the way that he's been able to deploy some of these guys and help them be productive. Outside of Scourton, though, which was a huge portal get for them, it has to be acknowledged that whenever a team has this much roster turnover through the portal and they lose a lot of young guys from what was originally the most talented recruiting class ever a few years ago, when all of those guys hop in the portal, Walter Nolan, LT Overton, Evan Stewart, that's just to name a few. When you lose those guys, you're going to be thin in the back end of your roster. I think their starters are going to be fine. I think they're going to be tough as nails. I think they're going to punch you in the mouth. I think they're going to run the ball really freaking well. They've got one of the most underrated offensive lines in the SEC with all the experience that they're bringing back. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be potentially deep enough that if injuries start to pop up, it's kind of like the Arizona conversation that we had where new coach could lead to some promising things in the future. But right now at this given moment, later on in the season, if injuries pile up, it could bite them in the ass.
Joe, let me tell you what I feel like, and then I'm going to tell you my gut reaction to it. On paper, Joe, Moose Muhammad, I'm in love with Moose Muhammad. I always kind of have been. I think that he is, Joe, I think because you do a lot of draft stuff, I think come this time in January, you're going to be saying, hey, man, he might not be a first-round talent, might not even be a second, but you'll look up in the third round and see like the Detroit Lions select Moose Muhammad, and you're like, oh, shit, yeah. Look at them drafting a really good prospect in the third round. But, Joe, that's not going to stop how good this kid is on the field. I was watching a lot of their games from the end of the season last year. Moose Muhammad continued to pop up in big-time critical situations. Connor Weigman is one of the more talented quarterbacks in the country. Credit to Billy Lucci. I saw him say this at SEC Media Days. Before Connor Weigman went down, we weren't talking about Connor Weigman and, as a young guy, he's developing. We were talking about Connor Weigman, him, Jane Daniels, and Carson Beck as the three best quarterbacks in the conference. So, look, the kid has had some really good flashes. Can he get through an entire year is a very big question. We'll have to wait and see here. Joe, you're bringing in too much, though. Like when my gut, my brain on paper says, oh, man, they got a shitload of talent on defense. They're moving in Stewart, I think Shamar Stewart to the interior. I think they announced at SEC Media Days. On paper, you got talent everywhere. And I'm like, dude, they could be a problem. Why does my gut tell me don't put all my chips in on them going 9-3 though? Something's just holding me back from saying, hey man, it's A&M. And I hate saying that. I really do actually hate saying that because I look at them, Joe, they're really talented, but you got Texas. You got to go to Jordan Hare late in the season. You got LSU. You got Missouri. You got to go on the road to Florida. Oh, by the way, you start the season off with Notre Dame. Joe, that's 4 losses that you can have right there.
I think what you're saying, it's not – this year it shouldn't be the case of like, oh, it's A&M. Maybe they end up falling short. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that the something that you can't define is what I'm talking about. Go look at their portal haul. They brought in a lot of new kids. It is really freaking hard, first-year head coach, to immediately get that roster to gel and to hit the ground running. It's going to take some time. And a lot of those guys aren't even really necessarily listed as starters. Like Des Ricks is still a young kid. He's listed as a backup corner on our lads. Those types of guys are the ones that are going to have to contribute, the ones that are listed as backups when you start to see injuries pile up. And when there's not a total familiarity, depth, I think, could totally be an issue. I am really intrigued by Connor Weigman, though, man. I mean, the kid is so natural at the position. I really thought that he was going to be the X factor in the Miami game, and then that was going to be a big reason why that they could have won that game.
Through two big picks. Two big picks. Yeah, I mean, it was a learning moment. And look, Joe, again, we're talking about a kid that was in his fourth start, right? Like, I mean, like, come on. I mean, he threw two picks. It doesn't change the fact that he was really good.
No, and I think that there's even more room for him to take this massive step forward with all the guys. The big thing that I'm like really focused on is the offensive line. Like, I'm really impressed by the group that's coming back. It's not exactly a sexy, hey, here's a bunch of first-round picks type of an offensive line, but it has a really stellar group of dudes that have been playing together for a pretty long amount of time. Like Trey Zune is an experienced guy who probably is more of a late-round prospect, but has been a part of that offensive line unit and knows what it's going to take for this team to work together. And they brought Basantis back, who almost decided to leave in the portal.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, though. The schedule it's brutal. They did not get a very favorable schedule. Is it survivable? Yes. They got a lot of
they could go on the road and beat Florida.
They're going to beat Florida. I think that they're going to beat Florida.
You said that about Tennessee in the beginning of the year, too. And people go in there, Joe, again, we forgot that they were –
yeah, but they don't have Joe Milton at quarterback, man. They don't have.
Yeah, but
Joe Milton is the reason why they lost that goddamn game. We can all sit here.
I will remind you. Remember going into the Georgia game, Florida, who played a pretty similar schedule, was 5-2 going into the cocktail party. That means they were beating teams like Texas A&M, right? So you say that, but we're going to get midway through the season, and Billy Napier's got his patented 5 wins, and he can't make it to a bowl game. And then what? Let me say this. You cannot deny their talent on both lines of scrimmage. That, for me, is why I'm like, man, don't play around with them. Do not play around with them. Because, Joe, again, I think Notre Dame's going to win. So when I say this, don't freak out. I think that game's closer. I told you I thought it was a 7-point game, mainly due to the fact about how much talent that they have at the line of scrimmage. 7 to 10 points. I think that's a close game, considering that's game 1 for Mike Elko and company at A&M. You lose to Notre Dame by 7 to 10 points in the opener, I probably feel like I'm coming out of that game saying, damn, that defense and offensive line, I know they lost, but shit, what happens if they figure it out throughout the season and everybody starts getting in a cohesive unit? Are you looking at a team that can go 10-2? Is Notre Dame a playoff team? So there are questions like, man, I look at them on both lines of scrimmage and say, yeah, you can say what you want about them. When you can run the football and you can get after the passer and you can stop the run, you're hard to beat, man, when you're that physical.
The only thing that I'd counter with this, though, is that, like, how often do we see a first-year head coach in the SEC?
You mean Brian
succeed?
Kelly?
Well, but he's not. But I knew that was going to immediately pop in your head. He's not Brian Kelly, though. Brian Kelly was a long-time coach at Cincinnati, Central Michigan, Notre Dame before he took the LSU job.
Very fair.
The only head coaching experience that Mike Elko has is 2 years in the ACC at Duke. And I cheered on the hire. I thought that this was a much better hire than Stoops. I thought that this was the guy that they should have gone with all along. But like first year, I don't think the expectation should be 9-3 and go to a playoff. It absolutely should not be. 8-4. 8-4 is a great goddamn season with all of the turmoil and distractions that you dealt with last year.
All right, can you name the 4 losses?
I think they lose to Notre Dame. I think that they lose to LSU. I think they lose to Texas. And I think that between Missouri and Auburn, they're going to lose one of those.
But what if Auburn stinks?
I don't think Mr. Auburn's going to stink. I think Auburn's going to be much closer to A&M than they would be closer to stinking.
LSU hasn't won in what was the guy that clipped us and we went viral on, and we were trying to get him on the show, but we had things going on. I mean, LSU hasn't won at Kyle Field. Could they go there and lose? I love LSU. I know what Joe Burrow went in there and lost in 7 overtimes. I know the kooky ass shit that happens at Kyle Field at night. The cult comes out. Joe, you know, they're cult. Crazy shit happens. Everybody should take cyanide if they have to go in there. Don't clip that part out. I don't know what I said. Nevertheless, I think their high ceiling, Joe, is 9-3. Could they surprise people and go 10-2? I would be shocked if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think that's on the radar.
I think they have a very low floor in reference to it being 8-4. I don't know if their ceiling is above 9-3 though. That's where
you mean they have a high floor? You said low floor. 8-4 would be pretty high floor.
Well, we've come in here and said that the floor for a team is 6-6. I mean,
yeah,
Joe,
so that's a high floor. That's to be 8-4. That means it's high.
Okay, well, fair. Yeah, you're right.
I'm trying to correct you so that we don't get hit within the comments of
fair.
You're saying they're going to have 2 wins because you're saying low floor. That's going to happen.
All right. Yeah. I mean, 8-4, 9-3. I think that's where they sit. Yeah. But again, my brain continues to tell me something different than my gut. My gut says they go 8-4. My brain says, Blake, they going to kick some team's ass on the line of scrimmage. Like, for example, Auburn is not as talented along the line of scrimmage. So we talk about that game, right? Mm-hmm. They ain't that talented. So then I look at Missouri. Joe, you want a hot take? Are you 1,000% certain the team we just talked about, the Missouri Tigers, you talked about how bad their secondary is with Connor Weigman, Moose Muhammad, and the boys, that they can't get some shit rolling?
I think they are going to beat Missouri. I think Missouri is actually going to be one of their
so then you're saying 9-3.
I don't know, man. That Auburn game just makes me feel weird. It's at Auburn.
It's at Georgia.
That's a total trap where you're really high on yourself.
Looking at Texas, trying to look forward maybe. I get it. And Jordan Hare's a tough place to play.
Yeah.
But you cannot convince. Well, it's not about convention. I don't even think it's opinion. Auburn does not have a better offense and defensive line that is more talented than A&M.
Well, they did it against Alabama, and they should have beaten Alabama last year. I think that.
See, hold on to that exact point. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, Joe, there is no reason Alabama should have lost by 3 or one. Excuse me, should have won by 3 points against A&M. None. There's nothing that quantifies a 5-7 team to be on the team legitimately on the ropes that won the SEC. Alabama didn't lose an SEC game last year. Like, we forgot about that. Not one. So I don't know, man. I just think they're really talented up front. I don't think you can take that away from them. Oh, and by the way, their head coach is a nasty son of a bitch that wants to hurt people.
Well, that's what I was getting at earlier. I mean, he's a hard-ass coach. Like that, the way that the roster is constructed.
Dan Campbell of college football.
I don't know if he's as cool as Dan Campbell, but I like Elko. That plays into my point though, that this roster is structured to play to his strengths. He didn't have to do a whole lot of like re-identifying guys and trying to completely rebuild this thing. It is up front in your face. And again, Scourton, there's probably gonna be a game where he completely blows somebody up and has like 3 sacks or something insane. And, we're talking about him as the best player in the SEC because he completely dominated. Maybe that is the Missouri game. Maybe it's against LSU. Maybe it's against Texas, whatever it might be.
Well, I was just about to say, the scouts are drooling Will Campbell versus Nick Scourton.
That's going to be a damn good game. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.